You might have heard sports traditionalists complain about money taking center stage in top-level sports. You might hear them go on and on about the old days when sports were much simpler and athletes earned a normal wage. Today, most top athletes are millionaires if not billionaires, and there's one man dominating them all. It's Roger Federer. In today's video, we'll be going over the tennis player bagging the top 5 positions in Forbes' highest-earning athletes ranking. So why's the Forbes list so important? So why's the Forbes list such a big deal? It's a big deal because it outlines which athletes have done outstandingly in terms of making money. Now, it's important to note that the most money doesn't always mean that you're the best player in that sport. Far from it, actually. Even with all that money in the sport, it can't be the only decider of quality in a field as vast as this one. However, what it's actually useful for is determining which athlete is the most valuable and where they rank in the world of sports. In essence, players like Messi and Ronaldo in football are clearly the best players in the world, but they're also the most valuable to their teams financially. This financial worth matters, in the long run, making a ton of difference in how the player is viewed. Moving on, Roger Federer's inclusion in the Forbes list. According to Forbes' recent ranking of the highest-earning athletes all over the world, Roger Federer is on the 5th position. Outranking him are the golf legend Tiger Woods and the one and only Cristiano Ronaldo, NBA legend LeBron James, and the man himself, Lionel Messi. According to Forbes, Roger has earned a total of $1.09 billion across his entire case. Mind you, he hasn't played a tournament since Wimbledon last July. It makes sense then to recognize that Federer being on this distinguished list is a big deal. But before we get into all of that, what was it about him that allowed him to make it to this list? Surely, the earnings he made from winning titles weren't enough to put him at the top of the highest paid athletes around the world. As it turns out, no one can make it to the top 5 on competition earnings alone. Even if the sports traditionalist tells you that there's too much cash going around, competition earnings are nowhere near enough to single-handedly put an athlete in the upper echelons of rich people in the world. Well then, how exactly did Federer make it to the list? What is it then that propels Federer to such a high ranking in a list such as this? Well, he has several streams of income, all working together to make him as rich as he is today. First of all, of course, are his competition earnings. We know that we mentioned them not being enough, but they still play a part in his total earnings. His prize earnings are no joke either. He's earned over $130 million in competition earnings, which includes playing and winning in several Grand Slams, playing exhibition matches, and other friendlies too. $130 million is a lot of money. It could probably last a lot of people their entire lifetimes, but it's not all that Federer earns. In fact, it's actually a very small portion of his total income. Up next, moving on, here are the other sources of Federer's income. He also has one of the best sponsorship stacks among all athletes. His best sponsorship is one he signed with Uniqlo in 2018. He earns $300 million. Yes, $300 million a year. This deal is set to last up to 2028 when the designated 10-year period would finally end. Federer has a lot of other sponsors too. They can almost get overwhelming at times when you read them out. He's sponsored by Barilla, Credit Suisse, Group ADS, NetJets, Wilson Sporting Goods, and even Switzerland Tourism. Yes, Federer is so popular that he's now an ambassador officially sponsored to promote tourism back in his country. Talk about having an impact. And this isn't even all of his sponsors. He's been sponsored by so many more, which we can go on and on about. But let's move on to discussing the story itself in more detail. Next up, has Federer been around the top of this prestigious list before? Turns out that the answer to that question is no. Ending up number 4 globally and number 7 overall isn't the highest Federer has ever achieved. In fact, he's been a regular on the list for some time now. He's been on the Forbes list for around a decade now, even hovering around the top 5 and in the top 5 sometimes too. What's more, this isn't even the highest he's ranked on this prestigious list. As it turns out, Federer had reached number 2 all the way back in 2013, owing to a flurry of awards he'd won around that time and the sponsorships he had attained. By 2018, his Uniqlo sponsorship was active, netting him $300 million per year. As these benefits stacked on each other, they lifted Federer up to number 1 in 2020. A massive achievement for him financially, of course. What's also notable is that even after getting to number 1, Federer is still going strong. He's been included both years since, and he's still very popular and valuable to all his sponsors. This bodes well for his future after retirement, as he'd be looking at a lot of support from his sponsors. Why is it such a big deal? Well, that's all fine and dandy, but why are Federer's recent inclusions such a big deal? It's just money, right? We all know that athletes earn a lot. What's so special about Federer topping a rather meaningless list? Well, first of all, Federer is the first ever tennis player to be in the top 5 of that list. He's had a phenomenal career with a lot of earnings, but so have others. Federer is far from the first player in tennis history to enact world domination like this. What's really special and different about Federer's dominance is that he and his team have found ways to capitalize on this insane success in a way that attracts sponsors. It's also a big deal for tennis as a sport. For a list usually dominated by heavily paid basketball players and the best footballers around the world, a tennis tennis player dethroning them and competing with them in subsequent years is a big deal. It shows that tennis now has the caliber to compete with the best paid in any sport. It also shows that brands are now more willing to splash the cash on tennis players, something that hasn't happened before this. For Federer's personal legacy, it means that he's achieved it all. As a financial expert suggested, he's mastered what they call the Michael Jordan formula: be consistently popular in a sport that is viewed all across the world, stay out of controversies, be charismatic and an entertaining figure. This is what the brands love to spend their money on, and Federer has perfected this. In other news, Federer is returning from his break. If you're a Federer fan like all of us, you're most probably counting the days for any hint of Federer's return to the court. After his third knee surgery last August, he was on bed rest for a pretty long time. We hadn't seen him play or even practice tennis at all. There were speculations that he might even just hang up his boots. Despite all of that, everyone sort of knew that Federer wouldn't retire this easily. He's been one of the greatest of all time, and he can't just retire without a glorious send-off. Currently, it doesn't seem like he plans to retire at all, though. That's gotta be encouraging news for everyone looking forward to his return. The 20-time Grand Slam champion uploaded a video of him practicing tennis full swing on a private court, trying to get back in the swing of things, pun intended. It showed him practicing with that majestic swing of his that has won him so many titles. Many speculate that he's making his much-anticipated return to the court in late September at the LeVay Cup. And finally, let's have that dreaded retirement talk. After the LeVay Cup, Federer gets to participate in a home tournament. The Swiss Indoor Basel Cup takes place in late October, and a lot of people believe that this is where Federer might call it quits to one of the most historic tennis careers of all time. It'll be a fitting end to one of the biggest and most iconic sports careers to come out of Switzerland. So, it makes sense that Federer would choose to hang up his boots in front of his home crowd, where he's of course adored like a king. When talking about retirement, he mentioned that he feels the need for tennis deteriorating in his life. He has a wife and kids, and a career after tennis being an ambassador, and just a whole life of enjoyment ahead of him. He said that tennis would always remain a part of him, but that it doesn't define who Roger Federer is anymore. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think of Federer's recent inclusion in the Forbes list? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.